Good evening, everybody. Hopefully everybody can hear me. Councilwoman Anthony, can you hear me?
Oh, you might be muted on the...
He's muted now, Sean. I can hear him. I heard him before.
How about now? Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Perfect. All right, we're going to begin this evening, this meeting, okay? It's February 23rd, 2021, Tuesday. It's the City Council of Providence, Committee on Finance. We're going to call this meeting to order. Roll call, Madam Clerk.
Chairman Igliosi.
Present.
Vice Chairwoman Ryan.
Present.
Councilwoman Castillo. Absent. Councilman Anthony. Councilwoman Anthony.
You're muted, Councilwoman Anthony.
She doesn't seem to hear.
I don't think she can hear us. She can't hear us.
I can hear you. Are you talking to me?
Oh. Yeah, okay, yep.
Oh, sorry.
She's asking you if you're present. Are you present?
You're right. I had you turned down all the way. I'm so sorry. I just turned you back up. Okay. Sorry about
I don't take offense. I don't take any offense right now.
None meant.
Are you present? The clerk needs to know if you're here.
Oh, I'm present. Yeah.
All right.
There you go.
Councilman Taylor is absent. We have 3 present and 2 absent. We have a quorum.
Thank you. Let the record reflect that the General Auditor Gina Costa is present, the Treasurer Jimmy Lombardi is present, PJ Fox, Sean Bouchard from the Council Office, Ernie Almonte is present, Billy Kepner, and of course Kenny Chiaverini, our City Solicitor from the City of Providence. All right. So if I could entertain a motions to continue items 1, 2, and 3 to the next finance meeting. Vice Chair, you're muted.
So moved.
So moved.
Okay. Vice
Second.
Chair makes that motion. Second by Councilman Anthony. Discussion. All in favor? Aye. Next item number 4. We need to continue that to the next finance meeting, which will be this Thursday, in which the administration will make a presentation about the proposed contract. But
Motion to continue. Item 4.
Second.
Vice Chair, second by Councilman Anthony. Mr. Clerk, do you understand what we're doing? All right, so it'll be on the next finance meeting for this Thursday?
Yes.
The next one. Thank you.
Yes.
All in favor?
Aye.
Okay. Thank you. Let's take an item out of order because I think 5 may take a little bit longer than 6. So we're going to have a little presentation. Can we have a motion to take item number 6 out of order and
So moved.
to begin that? Vice Chair makes that motion. Second by Councilman Anthony. Discussion. All in favor? Aye. Madam Clerk, item number 6, please.
Healthy Communities Police Diversion Programs presentation. The following have been invited. Rachel Newman Green, Deputy Director, Healthy Communities Office. Colonel Hugh T. Clements, Police Department.
Great. Are they here right now?
Ms. Green is...
I see Ms. Green is here, right?
I am
Great.
here, yes, thank you.
Right,
Nice
so
to be here.
before we do that, 1 second, Ms. Green, 1 second. Let the record reflect that Councilman Pedro Espinal is present. Could you swear in Ms. Green? We're gonna, just so everybody understands, tonight's meeting is gonna be a little bit tight. We're gonna try to get everything wrapped up within an hour. There's some pressing matters later on this evening. But so let's try one thing at a time. So this is the first we're gonna hear. We're gonna hear more about this, of course. So it's not the beginning. Actually, this is not the end of the conversation. It's the continuation of our same conversation dealing with diversionary programs for the City of Providence. So, Madam Clerk, you read the item. Mr. Clerk, can you swear in Ms. Rachel Newman Green, please?
Ms. Newman Green, will you please raise your right hand? Do you swear under penalty of perjury that the testimony you're about to give is the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth to help you God?
I do.
Thank you. Could you please state your name and title for the record?
My name is Rachel Newman Green. I'm Deputy Director of the city's Healthy Communities Office.
Welcome, Ms. Green.
Thank you.
Can you just give a quick update on where we are on the proposed diversion program?
Sure, and when you say quick, how quick do you want me to go?
Well, it's the beginning. I know we're gonna have deeper conversation, but just so we get a sense of where the administration is, and you know what are they thinking of, and what do they want to achieve? You know, what's the end game? Before we do that, 1 second before I begin, let the record reflect that Councilwoman Carmen Castillo is present and Councilman Taylor is present.
So noted.
Ms. Green, if you could quickly give us a briefing on where we are with this proposed diversionary program, which I believe is a request in the upcoming budget.
It is, and I know that My predecessor, Ellen Sinar, has presented to this committee previously, so I apologize if I'm restating anything that Ellen has already told you, but I'm hoping that I give you some meaningful updates on where things stand right now.
Fantastic.
So the first thing that I think is an important perspective on this is that the overall program here is not isolated. It's not isolated projects. It's a multi-component program. There are 4 components overall that we're working on fleshing out for both to commence under the FY21 budget and then hopefully to continue into future years. So I think the item that is of great interest, I know, to everyone is the Public Safety, Behavioral Health, and Social Service Diversion Program. That program is envisioned right now being in 2 phases. One being a planning phase, because we don't really honestly know what is the right structure or form or anything for that program yet. So our vision in fiscal year 21 is a planning process and then moving into implementation in 22 and into the future. The other components of the big picture here are the homelessness support services, also known as SOAR, S-O-A-R. We also are looking to more flesh out our neighborhood-based outreach services for people with substance use disorders or for people who are at risk of overdose or in need of social service supports in all the neighborhoods. And then the 4th component that I think a lot of you may be familiar with is support for Providence Safe Stations, which has been a pretty successful program. So I anticipate that probably the diversion planning services might be of most interest to folks. So I'll go sort of into deepest detail of that and where we're at right now.
Please do.
So as I said, this is a planning process that's going to be helping the city determine the best structure for an alternative emergency response system. The purpose of the planning process is to answer questions like, when a community member needs help with a behavioral health or social service emergency, who do they call? Is it 911 or something better? When that call is received, what's the process to make sure that whoever responds to the emergency is the appropriate agency and the appropriate party? The planning process will figure out questions like, who are the agencies that need to be engaged in the response and how? And then also figuring out questions like what training and other resources are needed to make this new system a success. So the request for this planning process in FY21, 21, like I said, is $150,000. Where we are in that process right now is that there was initially the RFP was released in September, and then due to feedback from some members of the council and other folks, that was actually pulled for some reconsideration, looking at where we were in the budget process and really what the needs were. So at that point, it was envisioned at that point that we would be trying to move into both planning and implementation in fiscal 21, but we pulled back and decided that what the focus in fiscal year 21 was really going to be in this planning process. So we reissued the RFP at the 12/21 box meeting. And folks potential bidders had until February 1st to reply. Because of snow, that actually the box meeting was delayed till February 4th. So that's when we opened the bids. And we received bids from 5 agencies: Health Management Associates Incorporated, FIO Partners LLC, Tides Family Services, VICTA, and the Providence Center. So to decide who the preferred vendor is among those, we have convened a panel of 11 reviewers from all sorts of different levels of expertise. So the 5 proposals are going to be reviewed by members of the Police Community Relations Bureau, Captain Henry Remolina and Tina Shepard. EMS Chief Zach Kenyon is going to be reviewing. City Council Chief of Staff PJ Fox is going to be reviewing, bringing in his experience with the Nonviolence Institute that he had in his previous position. And then we have a number of community members. Dennis Baylor, who's with Project Weber Renew, will be one of the reviewers. Jordan Seabury, who is also formerly from the Nonviolence Institute. Dr. Akila Dulan-Kita, who was recommended by Councilman LaFortune. And then we have 4 city staff members who are on the review panel also: Colleen Fonseca, Brett Jacob, Jessica Athens, and myself. So the RFP included a scoring matrix, sort of based on how well the proposal will meet the qualifications that we laid out in it. And we'll be reviewing these over in the next week. We've asked all the reviewers to complete their review and scoring by March 1st. So that's Monday. And then we anticipate being able to recommend a vendor at the March 4th box meeting. By March 4th deadline for the March 15th box meeting. So that is the general layout of where we are in that process right now. The goal is that the planning process itself would be able to commence in April and run through the end of the fiscal year.
Thank you. Let the record reflect that Councilman Correa is present and Councilwoman Fortune is present.
So noted.
Ms. Green, continue.
I don't know if you want to move on. I can give you sort of summaries of where we are in the other 3 sort of aspects of the big picture, or if you wanted to go a little bit more deeply into that particular aspect right now.
Well, it sounds like the proposed award is in the process. Sounds like you have 11 people involved. Sounds like you're going to be doing an evaluation process, and then you're going to eventually look to award that. So let's put that aside. Why don't we hear the other 2 pieces, and we can go from there, okay?
Yes. So the second piece that I brought up was the Homelessness Support Services, also known as SOAR, which stands for SSI, SSDI, Outreach, Access, and Recovery. And that's based on national models. Basically, the program seeks to end homelessness by making sure that folks who are at risk of homelessness or experiencing homelessness have best access to all the different resources and that are available to them, because many times SSI and SSDI are resources that are missed by folks who are at those sort of precarious points in their lives. So we issued an RFP for that in October. The work around that would really be doing outreach to make sure that those folks who are homeless or experiencing homelessness or at risk of homelessness are connected with all those available resources. Rhode Island Coalition for the Homeless was a sole bidder. So they were approved as the contractor for that on January 4th. The funding itself is actually was put as being contingent upon passage of the fiscal year 21 budget and available funding in fiscal year 22. So they have been approved, but it's in a holding pattern until the budget is passed. So again, that's $150,000 for fiscal year 21, and then it would be similar scale moving forward into future fiscal years.
Okay.
The third aspect of it is neighborhood-based outreach services. So that piece is complementary to the multi-year downtown overdose hotspot grant that we have from the Rhode Island Department of Health. The goal of that is to provide targeted outreach services to reduce overdose and provide much needed social service and basic health supports in and around Kennedy Plaza. So the Rhode Island Department of Health focus under that grant, which is not included in this city budget request, is targeted specifically on downtown and on Kennedy Plaza. And we know that this need stretches across all neighborhoods. And our responsibility obviously is to the entire city, not just to Kennedy Plaza. So we'd be looking to support similar services that were equitably distributed throughout the city's neighborhoods. Also acknowledging that different neighborhoods have different needs, and the profile of what those needs are not going to always mirror what you see in Kennedy Plaza. So when we do go out for this, it would be to make sure that somebody is providing services that are tailored to the individual neighborhoods throughout the city. The budget includes a portion for purchasing overdose prevention supplies like Narcan, that sort of thing. And a portion of the requested budget is intended to be RFP'd out to the appropriate social service and outreach agency. So we have a request for $180,000 is included in our budget in fiscal year 21. And we know realistically, that being where we are actually in the budget cycle at this point, being able to engage and contract an agency to do that by the end of the current fiscal year seems unlikely. So our hope at this point, we would want to use a significant portion of that to purchase the previously mentioned overdose prevention supplies. But realistically, it wouldn't be till FY22 that we would be looking to engage in an RFP for service around that, just because by the time we get through the RFP process, fiscal 21 would be over, so there wouldn't be a lot of point. So again, and the vision would be that would be continuing into future fiscal years at that same scale of about $180,000 a year. So, and then the last is Providence Safe Station Services. So I think a lot of you might be familiar with that, but that was launched in 2018 in response to rising overdose crisis in Providence with the overarching goal of reducing drug overdose related deaths. It's a partnership between the city, fire, EMS, our office and the mayor's office, and the Providence Center's Anchor Recovery program. So Anchor Recovery already provides those services. They have a sole source agreement through the state to do that. And we have $50,000 in the FY21 request for them. We actually anticipate that has been approved, and we anticipate that will be on the mid-March box meeting for approval of actual payment. And then going forward, we hope that be about $100,000 a year in future fiscal years. So that's the kind of outline of the different components of the project and where we are in all of them.
Okay. Questions by committee members?
No, Mr. Chair.
Councilwoman Anthony?
Yes, can you hear me?
Yes.
Yes, thank you so much for the presentation. So I'm just trying to get, so what is the total for all these projects in the fiscal year 21 budget?
In the fiscal year 21 budget, it is 380, do I have the exact number in front of me? I'm sorry. Contractual.
370,000, isn't it?
I'm sorry?
It's about $375,000 approximately.
In contractual services, yes, for those. And then, yes, and then there's a piece of our budget request that also is for project management staff. Because of these 4 different components, we would need to have somebody to make sure that they are all, that all these different components are syncing up and moving towards a shared vision, and then evaluation for that work as well.
And I just have one more question. And then you said there'll be an ongoing budget in future years.
Yes.
And what does that look like?
So the anticipated request, let's see, for the public safety diversion program, we have so far, we're outlining $600,000 for implementation into fiscal year 22. And let's see, the homelessness support services, we would be including $150,000, so that would be the same funding as 21 and 22. Neighborhood-based outreach would be $180,000 a year going forward. And the safe stations, we would hope to be able to fund them to $100,000 a year.
Thank you.
Okay. Councilman LaFortune, do you have a question?
I have a, thank you. Thank you, Rachel, for presenting and being a part of this and all the work that the Healthy Communities Office has done with all the initiatives that you shared. I want to speak specifically to the crisis response initiatives. And back in this the start of December, end of June, I actually convened a team. And Chair, I was looking at my emails earlier today and remembered that I had sent an email to you back in July and had copied all the people who were convened as part of the team that we brought together, as well as the former chief of staff, the clerk, the director of policy, Billy, and the people that were convened to put together a framework for crisis response included Angela Ancoma, who was the VP of Community Investments at United Way, Chief Kenyon, who I met regularly to discuss crisis response, Becky, Daniel from Cahoots, PJ before he became part of City Council, and some other folks and folks from healthy communities like Ellen and Brett, and folks from the administration. So one of the things that we outlined in the framework was the diversity and equity. And although there is language in the RFP regarding diversity, equity, and inclusion, it doesn't seem like there's a criteria to score the different the organizations that responded to the RFP. Part of the issue with establishing some sort of crisis response intervention within the city is to decriminalize folks for a crisis issue or mental health or social behavioral issue. But what is critical is having some sort of DEI component, recognizing the diversity of people, their backgrounds, and embedding a the social justice framework that we had outlined. So can you explain a bit more of how you plan to assess the different organizations that have submitted a bid to choose them and to ensure that they will meet those types of requirements? The other thing is, considering the state, the financial state that the city is in due to the pandemic, investing this amount of money in a crisis response for a temporary solution rather than a permanent solution is a bit concerning for me. So if you could speak more to how this would eventually, if it goes through, it would eventually be implemented and also embedded into the city budget.
So Ms. Green, before you answer Councilwoman LaFortune's two-pronged question, the first prong has to do with the purchasing process. I just want the city solicitor just to weigh in on that, because you haven't done has the team, the 11 people met yet? Have they done the evaluations yet?
They have not. No, the folks have them.
Okay, hang on, just please. Has the 11-member team met and have they done the evaluations yet? The answer is no, right? Have they opened up the bids yet? Have the 11-member teams opened the bids? Do they have a possession of those bids?
Yes.
But who else from the 11-member review committee? Anybody else who's on tonight's Zoom meeting? Are they also on this conversation? Is Captain Melina on it? And I see PJ. So some of these people are on the review committee, correct? That haven't assessed and viewed. Now, this has nothing to do about the question per se. It's got to do about the purchasing rules and regulations. My question I want to ask the city solicitor is, I don't want to run afoul that we're discussing how this 11-member committee should evaluate in this forum here, when then therefore you could end up having to throw out all the bids because it turns into almost like it's a public pre-plan of who you're going to pick. And I don't know any of the bids. I don't know any specifics of the bids. I don't know any particulars of the bids. I don't even know what the bid says right now, because you haven't done your evaluation and awarded it. Traditionally, when that process happens, it's done in the criteria is already published. Mr. Cheverine, are you there, sir? And the reason why I deal with this in court all the time for bid protests, all the time. So so please understand where we're going. I don't want this conversation to hamper the movement of the bid process. Mr. Cheverine, are you there, sir? I see him there. So what I would ask is, could you put that answer to that question aside first until the city solicitor weighs in? Because I want to make sure that what you say doesn't cause any problems for someone to do a bid protest if you award it to somebody. You know, someone says, I should have got it, not this person. So I don't want to get, so I'm going to can we answer the second question to Councilman LaFortune? She had a two-part question. And then when Kenny Severini comes back on, we can just make sure we get some guidance. That's all I'm looking for. So could you answer the second part? Yeah.
Chair, may I ask a question? Chair, may I ask a question to you, please? In regards to what you explained. So I'm just for clarity, I just want to understand, because there's the whole bid procurement process, but in terms of the scope of the work and what's outlined, my question strictly pertains to the diversity, equity, and inclusion.
Oh, no, I know.
Which I don't think has anything to do with the procurement process.
What happens is when you put out an RFP, when you write the RFP, it will state what the criteria is
Correct.
that committee will review and evaluate on. So if there is, I don't want to know right now, if the RFP doesn't address the criteria that Councilman LaFortune is talking about, and now you're going to talk about saying you're going to be adding that later, I want to make sure we get guidance from the city solicitor. I have no problem with the criteria, Councilwoman. The question is, I don't want to run afoul with the purchasing rules that someone could potentially do a big protest. So I'm looking for the guidance from the city solicitor, but they're not answering right now. So what I'd like to do is, instead of having any further conversations right now, just put that on hold for a second. Let's answer the second part of your question. Let's try to get the city solicitor to give us some guidance. If he says there's no problem, then I have no problem. I just don't want my committee to be the record for someone to use it as a bid protest in Superior Court. That's the bottom line. So,
I understand where you're coming from, and I will say, I read.
Council, hang on, let's ask her this. Let her answer the second part of the question, and then we're going to try to get the city solicitor on. I am not, so just please bear with us for one moment. Can you please answer the second part of the question, Ms. Green, which I think is important.
Could you restate the second part of the question for me, please, Councilwoman?
Is it a permanent solution? I'm sorry, Councilwoman.
Yeah. So our intention, in this year for the diversion process is a planning process, and obviously the purpose of a planning process is to set up something long term. We have laid out, for fiscal year 22 and anticipating into the future what the expenses might be. I will say that, being as it's a planning process, we haven't yet conducted the planning process. We obviously don't know what the true expenses will be. And we did have to make some assumptions for fiscal year 22, saying that this would need $600,000. But I think through the planning process, and then obviously through the first year of implementation, we're going to learn a lot about what such a program needs to really be successful. And we fully intend to continue developing the program. And also, I think having a strong plan in hand is actually going to give us some really good resource to go out and pursue other funding sources, if they're federal, state, or private foundations, to keep this rolling. So we definitely, I think one of the things about this 4-piece sort of puzzle we have of all these different components is really about changing the vision of how the city interacts with this issue overall. And it really is about developing new systems. So hopefully, I think the intention is really to set up the systems through this planning process and through other things, but then also through long-term budget allocations and pursuing long-term funding.
Can I follow up, Chairman?
On that question, of course, Councilwoman.
Thank you.
And I think he's ready to answer the question. So, Councilwoman LaFortune.
Thank you. Thank you, Rachel. And I do understand that because, from the very beginning, I've been in conversations, engagement with the Healthy Communities Office and policy around implementing it. But what I want to remind everyone is that what the community has been asking is for a permanent entity, something that should be embedded within the city's budget. And just thinking about the cost of this whole implementation process, where it's actually going to be outsourced to another organization, there are some concerns around how can we respond to a crisis response when someone calls in. If it doesn't go directly to them, there's no mechanism to get it to public safety. There's also liability issues that I'm concerned about. So wouldn't it make sense to actually have something, whatever is being created now, to be something that will be permanently, not just a temporary solution that one day will be embedded within the city structure, but something that will be permanently embedded into the city structure, rather than to spend, about $1 million in total now and then have to spend a few millions in the future. I mean, we could start the foundation and doing the work and having like an entity and a mechanism that when someone has some sort of crisis response, whether it's mental or behavioral, that they can call in and they could be directed to the crisis intervention team that could respond to it. And there's also all the liability concerns are also addressed within that structure.
So I anticipate that the planning process, I think that is one of the greatest goals of the planning process, is to figure out what the sustainable structure for this is. So we're not going in with any assumptions about what the structure would be in future years. That's really the purpose of the planning process, is to engage all the stakeholders and to really look at the systems and figure out what is the system that needs to be established. So yeah, Councilwoman, I absolutely agree with you that this is probably not about RFPing out, and just RFPing everything away. I think at this stage, we just know that we need to take these couple of months in fiscal year 21 to figure out what the system needs to be. And then in future years is when we work on creating exactly the system that you're talking about.
Thank you. City Solicitor, are you there, sir?
Yes, Mr. Chair. I apologize. I was muted. I couldn't unmute, but I finally figured it out. But Mr. Chair, my response to your question, specifically to the RFP process, I think I'm not familiar with what has transpired or what potentially will transpire relative to going out to bid. I suggest that someone contact our office, specifically Adrian Southgate, who's very familiar with the bidding process. And if there is a criteria that's going to be utilized to award the bid or the contract, we should assist in weighing in on, making sure that that criteria is transparent and it is consistent with typical awarding of contracts and reviewing bids. So there is no challenge to the bid process, as you mentioned earlier, a bid protest.
So what I would suggest is Councilman LaFortune has a valid question. What I would ask the Councilman, if you could reach out to the City Solicitor's office and coordinate with them, with Adrian Southgate, and then see how that plays out. I'd rather you go through them and versus the public right now to this. And then if they say no problem, then they can report back and say this is what's happening. But so that particular question will defer to the Law Department. I asked Mr. Cheverini, can you have Adrian Southgate to reach out to Councilwoman LaFortune to
Absolutely.
Work out that, and also work with Ms. Green, all three, and work out that, get her question answered and see if it's part of the appropriate piece of the puzzle. All right?
Okay.
We'll start working on that tomorrow.
Thank you.
Okay.
And that all, even though the bid already went out and they've already selected, so all the information that I'm asking is public.
Well, no, they haven't selected, Councilwoman. What they've
No,
done
but the bid is but the RFP is public. So what is the scope of work that's outlined is public?
I know, but the issue is, let me say, this is what happens is,
Right.
they put the RFP out, right? And then now they opened all the bids. The RFP says the scope, whatever the criteria is. Now what's going on, the committee hasn't met, and now what's happening, we're having a public discussion on how the committee should evaluate the proposals before they've been evaluated by the committee and before it's been awarded. And what you're asking is the finance committee to do that in a public process at this time when the committee, the 11-member committee, it sounds like, that was created to do the evaluation, who some members are on this evening's call, what the question comes down to, is there undue influence? Are we subjecting ourselves to a bid protest? This has to do with being very cautious with the process. What happens is that when an RFP goes out and the bids are open, and then an evaluation committee meets, that's a process they have to follow, right? Where governments and entities get into trouble is when those entities, those evaluating committees, always get challenged on how they handle their evaluation process. And my concern is, and I think the City Solicitor has supported, is that this committee would end up being a tool that potentially could sway or influence some of the members of that review committee who are on the panel tonight and listening tonight to vote one way or another. I don't want to get involved in that. So I'm going to ask you to forward it to the City Solicitor's office, work it out with them, and we're going to move on to the next, to the City Treasurer, and we'll go from there. We'll get there. City Treasurer, you have a question, sir?
I do. I'm coming at it from the budget side, so I'm just if you can help me with the budget.
Drescher, you have a question?
I do. So you mentioned the cost is about 380,000,
Yes.
and you did mention earlier that you didn't know if you would spend that amount.
But because the $380,000 is in contractual services, and realistically, being as we don't have a FY21 budget yet, by the time that happens and we get into the contracting process, right, it does seem that there are a number of spots in this where it seems unlikely where we would spend down what is in the requested FY21 budget.
Okay, you have any estimate? So I guess you did you break it up into 180 and then a different number? So for example, the overdose prevention, those type of things, those are probably ongoing and you're spending that?
Yeah, so I can talk to that a little bit. So let's see, our request for the public safety diversion was $150,000. That will be used up within this fiscal year because that will be the planning process that happens before June 30th. The homelessness support services, likewise, well, actually, hold on one second. Let me just check my notes. That may be one that frankly does not get implemented by the end of fiscal 21. So that's $150,000 there. I think what we would hope to do actually is to go into contract for that, so we could get that working as early as possible in this. And that is the one that we already have. I misspoke. I'm sorry. That's the one that Rhode Island Coalition for the Homeless was already the sole bidder on. So we were actually in a good position to move forward on them with that immediately upon passage of the fiscal 21 budget. The other one is the one that specifically sticks out is the neighborhood-based outreach services. That's the one that we haven't yet issued an RFP, and we do hope to use about $90,000 of funds in those to purchase overdose prevention supplies, but that's out of a total request of $180,000 because we wouldn't be able to go into an RFP very likely before June. I don't see how we would be able to do that. We would definitely be able to purchase the supplies and have them distributed through folks who are doing this kind of work already, but actually getting into an additional contract doesn't seem likely. And then the Providence Safe Station Services, also we anticipate that we would be able to move forward with that. So what's outstanding really is probably about $90,000 from the homeless support services that we wouldn't be able to RFP out most likely. And then, yeah, that really is the most outstanding one.
And that's the new money. I just want to be clear. That's the new requests that are coming in.
The new fiscal
21 versus 20.
Yes.
And there's some personnel changes. Can you, and if you can't, I don't want to, I'm just trying to get to the budget.
Yeah. So personnel changes is another one where realistically, I'm serving as interim director right now. We don't have a department director and we're in the hiring process for that. So I don't anticipate that we would bring in additional staff until we have that position in place. So I also think that some of the personnel changes that we have anticipated in there very likely won't actually take place in this current fiscal year. By the time we went through a hiring process and brought somebody on, we'd be pretty much at the end of the fiscal year.
But you're still looking forward, let's say to 22 to have those positions?
Yes. Okay. And I would anticipate that frankly, we would be able to hire, as soon as the fiscal year 22 budget is passed, we would go right into a hiring process for those because those are really pretty key positions.
So if we were to create the positions and either fund them for a very short period of time or not fund them, as long as the positions are created and you're ready to move on them, yeah, that's okay. I'm not trying to, take something away that you're going to say, well, we needed that.
Yeah, I mean, if those positions are created but vacant through the end of 2021, through fiscal 21, that probably is fairly reasonable, but we would want to be able to move on them immediately in 22.
Right. Or, I mean, we could even, fund it for a month or 2 months or whatever, just so that you can move when you're ready.
Sure, that'd be perfect.
Right. Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. Any other follow-up? All right. Can you just provide a couple of things for the committee for this Thursday? One, I was just wondering, you mentioned you said overdoses on the rise in the city of Providence.
Yes.
I was wondering, so do you have, unfortunately, do you have that chart, I guess, showing what's happening out there? Like, how are you tracking that? How do we know that? Like, and what's happening? Do you have those facts and figures?
Yeah, we actually get regular quarterly updates from the Department of Health that tell us about what's going on. That's around our Kennedy Plaza specific work, but they give us sort of as much of a snapshot as they can around Kennedy Plaza, as much of a snapshot as they can around the city as a whole, and the state as a whole. So I would be happy to share that information that the Department of Health shares with us. There also is ongoing data from EMS and other folks. And I think Chief Kenyon was going to be on this evening. I don't know if he's on the call. He definitely, if you have a moment, would probably be able to speak to what he is seeing on the street, because the data that we have most immediately comes, frankly, right from him. Is Chief Kenyon?
Yeah, hang on. So we're gonna need we need that information.
Sure.
I'd like to see that, and then also I'd like to have a better understanding overall. It sounds like roughly it's $1 million program, but I'm trying to understand how much personnel are we talking about running this program? I'm kind of confused on that. How many positions are you looking for at the end of the day to run this? Like, I don't want to do $1 million program and have $1 million worth of personnel costs. It's like, that doesn't make sense to me.
Understand.
Like, so I'm trying to, because basically the personnel will just be monitoring the pass-through, because isn't it basically just RFPing it and then managing and making sure those funds go to these private entities and they perform that work that we're hiring them to do, right? Correct? I'm saying that's what I'm gathering, right?
Yes.
So it's more like a manager. It's a project manager who's going to be managing this overall $1 million program.
Exactly.
And their job's going to be to, make sure, track it, monitor it, manage it, make sure the program's being delivered correctly. If it is it not, all that stuff, and then do the appropriate thing. So
Precisely.
I presume that's it. So can you provide that to the? I'd like to get that. I want more specifics. Can you please provide it to the city clerk? I'm assuming the internal auditor and the treasurer on that?
I can.
And, I'm sorry. Do you have that?
I don't have it. Well, I can tell you that it's 2 A12 manager level positions that we're proposing. One being a program manager and one being an evaluation manager. And that has gone in with our budget requests, and I will track where that is in terms of any other document.
Oh, I need you to send it to the internal so we get an understanding of what you're talking about.
Okay.
The other question is, I noticed you talked about this past year or so with the pandemic. Has Kennedy Plaza still been the hot spot for overdoses as it normally has? I mean, has Kennedy Plaza been the same level of issues during? I'm just was wondering during the pandemic, because we're still in the middle of it. No one's still downtown. I mean, I know, and I walk downtown frequently, and I do see homeless and stuff, but I don't see the same volume. Usually, like right around 5 o'clock, I usually see at 5 o'clock, the homeless always gather at Kennedy Plaza, and roughly that's when I would see them a lot, and they're done with whatever they're doing during the day, and then they hang at the Kennedy Plaza at 5 o'clock, and they're all hanging around, and usually there's a good group of anyone, I usually see 25, I'm saying homeless, maybe not homeless, but they look at the people I see a lot on the corner, so, it's like usually usually about 30 to 40 of them I see always, at 5 o'clock, they come back to Kennedy Plaza to hang out, not for the busing, but they kind of hang out in the park area. So is that still happening right now?
It is, and we're very fortunate.
Is the volume the same?
The volume really has continued, and I think one of the things that's been a little bit strange is of course the pandemic has impacted things in different ways, because there was a time when pretty much nobody was downtown for much of anything, and there was a time when also, because of the pandemic, homeless folks were being offered emergency housing through the state. So that housing ended, and folks definitely saw a resurgence of the numbers of people in downtown. And I think what is really challenging is that so many of those folks are really in need of very basic health services and very basic resources, that as the economic impacts of the pandemic have continued, have gotten more and more acute. So we're lucky to be able to be, right now we're funded through the Department of Health to have Project Weber Renew be providing outreach services right in Kennedy Plaza, to be connecting folks with medical supplies, with emergency food, and also be referring them to social services. So unfortunately, the answer is yes, it has continued. And I think what's really most troubling is, like I said, because of the economic circumstances, people's realities have gotten sort of more and more dire, unfortunately.
Okay. So I'll let, because it's getting late in the hour, so I want to get to the 6-month view. I think, was it Captain Kenyon want to say something, or and then we'll go from there? And then on the internal auditor, did you have a question? I'll let the internal auditor speak, and then Captain Kenyon. I think it's
Yes,
Captain.
I just
Captain?
had one question.
Internal auditor?
When you RFP out the third party to oversee these programs, are they going to have any relationship with the police major that's just been created of community?
Yeah, so I think they absolutely are, because I think it's all a part of a big picture. I think that we're definitely depending on a strong relationship with that police major, and I think that that person, when the diversion program does get created, is going to play a pretty important role, obviously. So I mean, the short answer is yes, absolutely. That's an important position, and they'll be plugged in with this. Yeah.
And how about the training of the communication personnel so they know how to divert the calls?
That again is one of those things that is a part of the planning process. You know, I wouldn't know what those training needs are until somebody really does an analysis of it. So that's a part of the planning process that we're hoping to come out with, really a sense of what people's capacity is, but what needs to happen to get the current folks up to speed with whatever the new system will be.
And you're going to rely on the third party to make all those determinations?
That is included in the planning process. So we're relying on them to tell us what the needs will be. And the requirement really is for the party that's doing the planning process. They're not going to be pulling these ideas out of the air. They're going to be talking, having some really deep conversations with police and communications and all those sorts of folks to figure out, and other folks who are more community level people, to really figure out what the reality is and what gaps are. So,
okay, thank you.
Ms. Green, when will the actual plan, like, when are we actually going to see like an actual plan? Like, this is what it is. This is specific. Right now, we all agree with the mission statement. I don't think anybody disagrees with that. But right now, it sounds a little piecemeal. Like, you know, it's like there's a lot of unknowns, right? So my question is, when is someone to say, okay, this is, you know, you think you need a position here in the budget here, maybe this position, but no one really knows because you really haven't done the full plan. So my question is, when's that going to coalesce? When's that tangible plan? So this is what we really like to try to do. This is going to be the plan, this is going to be the structure, this is going to be the delivery service, this is going to be the execution, this is going to be the quality control. Where is that? Where is that, and when will that occur?
So because it's in the fiscal year 21 budget, the planning process really has to be done by June 30th. So this, the contractor for that will be responsible for providing us with a pretty substantial document laying out all those things. And obviously when you get into actually making things happen, there's a lot more to figure out. But, you know, ideally, the way that it's laid out right now, that process has got to be done by the end of June.
Okay, the next question I have is by doing this, does this mean all the 14 years of the other diversionary programs, from Family Ties and et cetera, to the GO Team, are we going to no longer fund them? Like, because basically this sounds like this is supplanting what they do.
Well, I would assume,
because it sounds like we're creating we already have a lot of these systems already in place, but it
Mm.
looks like we're gonna now create we're creating another wheel. We're reworking the wheel. We're reworking the wheel that exists, which is fine to make it better. Great. My question, does that mean all these other programs that the committee went through and showed exist, from Crossroads to Family Health, pretty much will they become obsolete and we will no longer fund them? Is that the goal? Or are we gonna have like this mishmash?
I would say no, because those service providers are the key people. When we're asking who responds when there's an emergency, those are who responds, right? So I think that a lot of those folks, when we get into the implementation phase, a lot of those folks will end up being funded through this piece of the work.
Okay.
But then they also have work, obviously, that is not specifically around emergency response, right? So I think that may still continue to come under other budget categories.
Okay, great. Councilman Anthony, then internal audit, and then we'll move on to the next issue. Councilwoman Anthony.
Yes, I just wanted to ask, during the planning process that is supposed to be taking place before June, will there be opportunity for public input?
Yes. So let's see, the way that it's laid out right now, first off, I will say to the chairman's points, I do have the proposals, but I have not read them yet. So I do not know what the individual bidders will be putting forth as a process. We do, have definitely asked that folks demonstrate and tell us about their activities that are going to really show a deep understanding of the needs of Providence, and that are going to engage stakeholders in developing that understanding of the needs of Providence. So I would certainly anticipate that a number of the folks who have bid will be proposing doing public processes. And then there's an important aspect of it that is a non-negotiable, which is that the RFP lays out that they need to engage a steering committee of community members to guide the process and move forward.
Thank you.
Great, thank you. I think internal auditors put her hand down, so I think we're going to revisit this conversation. So what I would do is just make a motion to continue item number 6, and then when you have more particulars after you go through your process with the committee and all that good stuff, I think the committee, I'm talking about your review committee, and you guys actually pick whoever you're looking to pick or looking to propose. I think it'd be great for you to come back to the committee and the finance committee and let us know, what's the process, where are we going with it, and how we're going to execute it. Okay.
Great. I look forward to the opportunity.
So thank you, Ms. Green.
Motion to continue.
Second.
And I know we get a chance to get the other folks to speak, but it's late in the hour. Motion by Vice Chair to continue, second by Council Castillo. Discussion, all in favor? Aye. Motion carries. Thank you. Let the record reflect that President Matos is present and Councilman Guncombe is present. Madam Clerk, item number 5, please.
Discussion relative to 6-month review of the FY 2021 budget.
Thank you. And who will be talking about this budget? Mr. Mancini, and who else? Ms. Lindberg, I presume?
Ms. Lindberg, yes.
Yep. So Mr. Clerk, could you please swear the 2 individuals in?
Would you please raise your right hand? Do you swear under penalty of perjury that the testimony you're about to give is the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God?
I do.
Mr. Mancini,
I do.
please state your title for the record.
Lawrence J. Mancini, Chief Financial Officer, City of Providence.
Crystal Lindberg, Deputy Finance Director for the City of Providence.
Thank you. Welcome both. Do you have any handouts, charts, or anything for the committee and the public to follow? Or is it
We
just gonna
do,
be verbal?
Mr. Chairman, thank you and good evening to the members of the committee and members of the council. At our last time together, when this matter was scheduled for discussion on February 11th, I believe Ms. Silveria had submitted to the council clerk
Do we have those
a 3-page document, which I believe she has modified.
Hang on, Mr. Clerk, do we have those items?
We do have those from the previous meeting. Let me see if we can get those put up real quick.
Do we have a hard copy for the chairman? Okay.
Do you want to print that real quick? Yeah.
All right, so we need to, Mr. Messina, I'll let you start speaking. Hopefully Mr. Clerk can find that item, and then the committee members, that we can see what it is. If not, then we'll bring it back. We're probably gonna bring it back anyway, but why don't you give us a general overview of where we are at this time with the
This is
city?
just a 3-page document, I believe.
I don't know.
It is, but Mr. Clerk, if I may remind you, there was a substitution of that document the following day for a math error.
I believe I have the update.
Thank you, sir. So, Mr. Chairman, again,
Yes,
and members of the committee, we've been asked to give you an update on the FY21. We did that update through 6 months through December of 31st of 2020. Of course, I remind the committee with due respect that we are operating without an appropriation, and as such, we're operating under the Section 806 of the Home Rule Charter, which is basically continuing authority. The only exception of that authority, as we work off essential spend only from the prior year adopted budget, is in the instance of debt service, had debt service been greater than the prior budget. Under Section 806 of the Charter, we are required and certainly would be required to make those payments. With that said, Mr. Chairman, through December 31st of 2020, the City of Providence budget, we were the beneficiary of additional funds received through the General Assembly under the coronavirus relief funding. What happened in December, as you well know, the General Assembly adopted what they've called their skinny budget, a term that they have used. And basically, in that regard, there was a pickup of revenue associated with certain categorical revenue categories that were furnished to the city, most notably in the area of funding to the pilot. The pilot had a pickup of $3,992,000.
Make a copy from?
You can get it on printer 1.
Continue, Mr. Mancini.
Yep. So if you look at the document that the clerk has now put on the screen, down below you see on the revenue overview, we've provided the committee with a breakdown of the coronavirus relief funds and how that affected the city budget and how that was actually a pickup to the budget. Naturally, there was a loss of revenue in meals and beverage and room tax, but there was a pickup categorically in distress revenue, pilot, motor vehicle, and a new category, or at least a category for that budget, known as per capita funding. The city had a pickup of close to 10.9 million of coronavirus relief fund revenue against a loss of revenue of 3 million. The net gain to the city budget was 7.9 million through the adopted budget of the General Assembly. That covers the information on page 1 of this document. If I could direct your attention to page 2, we've provided you a budget review that is consistent with the revenues based upon the FY20 adopted appropriation, revenues through December 31st of 2020 as an FY21 revenue receipt, and where we believe we'll be as a projection, notwithstanding yet to be adopted a budget, but where we think we'll be at year-end fiscal 21. And we do believe that when year-end arrives, that we will have picked up an additional $3.1 million in revenue. And yes, it will be offset by an additional $3.1 million in expenditures. But the categories that are before you demonstrate to you in the committee the areas where we had a revenue pickup or a revenue loss based upon previous information shared with this committee. Revenue losses certainly occurred in the area of hospitality and accommodation. We had losses associated with meals and beverage, hotel, parking, and that type of categorical expenses. But again, we had that pickup in the coronavirus relief fund, nearly 10.9 million to help offset some of those losses. On a bright spot, Mr. Chairman and members of the committee, if you look at the lower section of page 2 on the tax collections, you'll see that through December 31st, but I can continue to report to you even through the third quarter collection, which occurred in January. We are nearly identical to the third quarter, and in this report, the second quarter collection as we were a fiscal year prior. Our collections have been sound and solid. We've seen no diminishment of the collection of taxes. That's a good sign given the economy and given the coronavirus impact. I may remind the committee that the city budget revenue is based upon 70% of that budget revenue comes from taxes. So it's encouraging to see that the tax collections have been consistent and have been solid, no diminishment in tax collections. And we expect that throughout the year, Mr. Chairman, we will continue with tax collections being steady. And we expect, based upon the trend we see today through the third quarter, that we could end the year at $1.2 million greater roughly a half a percentage point better than what was adopted by our tax levy. I have before you on page 2 the various categories of revenue by category. If there is a question when I complete my report, I'm happy to answer those questions. If I could direct your attention and turn to page 3. Page 3 provides a similar exercise for expense overview, and it'll show you the various categories to the left of the adopted budget FY20, where we stand at December 31 of 2021. Again, without yet an adopted budget, and where we believe we will be under a projection for FY21. And again, we see that we will probably spend $3.1 million greater than last year's adopted budget, but we did identify $3.1 million in additional revenue to offset that so that we could expect to finish the year with a balanced budget. And the categories of expenditure are before you, including salaries, medical, pension, debt service, school appropriation, heat, light, and power, and other expenses. Since the COVID-19 pandemic, Mr. Chairman, as I have reported as the finance team on previous occasions, the administration has identified various budgetary impacts associated with revenue losses and revenue reductions, again, mostly in the categories of hospitality or accommodation. At the same time, we have done everything in our power to limit expense and cost overrun. We have basically resorted to essential spend only, essential hiring only, if you will, hiring freeze. Some of the other items that we've included is only essential positions filled, reduced and essential spending only. We were successful with the work share program, which concluded in January. That was a savings of better than $2 million, which helped us offset any expenses overrun in other categories of salaries. We've also reduced seasonal operations and programs, generating budgetary savings in those categories. We delayed the implementation of various program initiatives that had been intended. We did see a savings in the bond portfolio refunding, as had been reported in a previous meeting and has been discussed with your treasurer and internal auditor. That particular refunding or refinancing, as you would call it, generated in total $2 million in savings, $1.8 million in the current year, and $200,000 will be saved in fiscal 2022. And then we have continued to track and monitor expenditures strategically, looking for savings throughout the city budget in all the categories of expenditure. That basically completes our written report, and I welcome any questions or discussion at this time.
I need to see the whole panel.
Mr. Chairman?
Yep, Councilman Anthony?
Yes, do we have a copy of this report? I don't see it in my files.
It has only just been uploaded. We weren't sure if it was going to be entered into the record, and we have it now as 5A if you would like to enter it into the record. And it is on the website that is posted on the agenda. I can put that up as well. Let me stop.
Is it in with our list of documents on that?
Yes,
Whatever
on
we
what we call the Confluence site. Yes. If you refresh it, I can put that up on the screen real quick so that anybody who's new to the process can see where to go. I'll just put that up briefly if the chairman is fine with that.
Thank you.
Can we do this then? Can we have a motion to enter this 3-page document from Sarah Severia, from the Finance Director?
So moved.
6 months review.
Second.
Vice Chair makes that motion, second by Councilwoman Castillo. We're going to identify it for the record as what, Mr. Clerk?
5A.
5A? All in favor? Aye. Motion carries. Thank you. Internal Auditor, you have a question?
And also, sorry to interrupt, the public can go to this highlighted webpage to get the list of documents, and this will be the last document that is on that webpage if they'd like to download it themselves.
Madam Auditor?
Okay, thank you. Larry, I just have a question, and I know that you have been very, very cautious on expenses. But when I look at department expenses, you only have 18.6 million through December. I mean, 6 months, just simple multiplying it for 2, it's only 37.2. How do you get to 45? What expenses are you considering that are going to get to that high?
So, Madam Auditor, I don't have the exact breakdown, but I do know that there are some significant seasonal expenses that occur. So bear in mind, it's not as simple as the half year and then multiplied by 2 or double the number. There are seasonal adjusted expenses that will occur between January and June. I don't have that schedule in support of that number, but I'm sure Ms. Silverio or Ms. Lindbergh can provide that to you tomorrow.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
With that said, for the 6-month review, what I need you to do, Mr. Mancini, Ms. Lindbergh, Ms. Sarah, is to break down each month. Break down each month specifically every department, every revenue, every expense, we have to pay this, we have to pay this bond, we have to pay this pension payment, this. So we have to see each month how it's going, right? Every month, there's got to be a breakdown. I know someone has, so we need this thing, this is like more of a bird's eye, it's a collection, right? It was been collated. Now I'm looking for a breakdown of each month, and I think it'd be helpful. The other question I have, what I would like to understand is this, and I recognize the federal government's about to pass on a $2 trillion bailout package, which means there's going to be even more money flowing to all these cities and towns. All that stuff. My question is that in our 6 months, this past pandemic in particular, the money that we received from the state and the state received that money from the federal government, question is, if, just like anything else, great, we got that money, it kept our budget balanced, we were able to pay our bills, right? But I'd like to know what things did we not do during these times? Like what things that we couldn't do, right? The next question is, are certain things that we need to prepare not to do because the federal government's only going to they're only going to be printing out so much money. This next big $2 trillion package, right? After that, sooner or later, the federal government just can't keep printing money. I mean, they're gonna see how that plays out. They haven't even figured out the first package, right? That money even hasn't been all fully allocated. The first bailout package hasn't been even allocated to the city yet. All that money hasn't even been done yet, right? I mean, we haven't received all that. It hasn't received it all. It's so that fallout hasn't even happened. So my question is, it's kind of like anything else. Is like, do we now? With these two budgets, now next year's budget, I'm talking, let's say 20, in the last budget of this council, this administration, is, for all intents and purposes, it looks like financially, you're going to be generally okay because all this federal dollars are flowing down. But if we just spend the federal dollars on expenses that we shouldn't be doing right now, because the next council, the next mayor is going to inherit, oh, by the way, all the federal dollars are spent, it's all done. Here's a $30 million deficit problem you need to go chase. So I'm just wondering, have we planned out next 5 years? And so people, by the way, and made the appropriate adjustments, in those 5 years based on the pandemic, the federal dollars, what will be available, won't be available. Have we done that, Mr. Mancini?
So, Mr. Chairman, if I may, let me just answer the last question first because it's important. Normally in December, we submit to this committee, through you, sir, a 5-year projection each and every year. By agreement of the finance team and your internal auditor, I believe the treasurer, we thought it would be appropriate and prudent to wait until there was an adopted budget. And we were also given that consent by the state. The state has a regulation that within 30 days of adopted budget, we must file what's known as an adopted budget report. That in itself, Mr. Chairman, is a 5-year projection. So rather than redoing the information in multiple fashions, we've agreed that we couldn't really do that well without an adopted budget. And we will do that nearly immediately. But yes, we will take a look at not just the 5 years forward, or hence the immediate first and second years after the adopted budget, which will include both FY22 and FY23. It's important to note for the committee that we have a $7.8 million projected other revenue loss from meals and beverage, hotels, parking, red light camera, speed zone, that the 10.9 additional coronavirus relief fund helped make up and support to bring us to a balanced budget, even with some additional spending increases in the expenditure line. So has it helped us? No, most definitely. Otherwise, we would have had to make some additional severe cuts. We've been able to maintain the sustainability and balance of the budget because of those coronavirus relief funds. And we were very grateful when the General Assembly was able to pass those through the cities and towns. And certainly Providence being the largest city in the state, and our budget, we were able to help sustain those revenue losses. Going forward, we would hope that the economy will rebound. Everyone expects that to be the case with the $1.9 trillion American Recovery Act. We would expect that that'll go to states and cities. I'm not privy to any number or projection yet. I'm hearing different numbers, but I think you're right about that there will be some makeup money, if you will. And that would probably get us through the 22 budget. And then I think any tough decisions will have to follow from there. But I do think that we're already in that mindset of thinking what items today would require sustainability, what items would require, a tightening, if you will, of our expenses. So we are looking at that. We're working diligently. We expect to be before this committee again, I hope soon, to actually go through with the revised proposed budget. With your permission, Mr. Chairman, and members of your committee, we'd like to do that as quickly as possible. We're working with your council finance member team to get to that point, and I'm hopeful that this committee will bring us before you in the next few weeks. So.
Thank you. Councilman Taylor, then the internal order. Councilman Taylor?
Yeah, Larry, I know I had a question last time, and I know Emmanuel sent over some stuff about the people that were at City Hall. They were temporary employees that get paid by the COVID-19, yada, yada, yada. But the question I still have, and I haven't got answered, is the temporary employees, 2 per recreation center. Why are we still paying them?
With due respect,
when we went through all those people that got laid off, furloughed, everybody's back to work. Well, I shouldn't say everybody, but most of the people are back to work. And I just wondered why those temporaries stayed on in the recreation centers.
Councilman, you'll have to forgive me. I'm not intimately acquainted with the information that you're asking for, but I would be with your.
So in the summertime, they hire 2 people usually for the recreation center. This called seasonal employees, and they work to a certain amount of time, and then they're off. But these people have been in the recreation center, 2 per recreation center. And so the director and deputy directors are staying home because the recreation centers are closed, besides giving out food. And the 2 temporary employees are still at each recreation center. I don't understand that. When the director and deputy director, because they're staying home, I hear that the recreation centers in the near future will be open, but that doesn't answer why for the last year that these people have been paid, and we furloughed and laid off other people that were actually, which didn't make sense. Obviously, parking enforcement is down because there's nobody coming to the city, but they weren't working either. They were furloughed. So.
So with your permission and consent, I will get the answer from the Director of HR and report back to the internal auditor by tomorrow.
Okay, I appreciate that because I asked last time, and like I said, he gave me the answer, but not that answer. And then I sent another email to say, what about this? And I know I asked you like a couple months ago, and I still haven't received that answer. So if you could get that for the next meeting, I'd appreciate it.
I will.
Internal auditor, then Councilwoman Anthony.
Mr. Chair, I didn't have any more questions. I forgot to lower my hand. Thank you.
Okay. Councilwoman Anthony?
Mr. Chairman.
That's a relief.
Sorry? Not
You're off the hot
I
seat.
thought I saw you smile.
Thank you.
Mr. Chairman, I'm just wondering when we will be discussing the revised 2021 budget on the committee floor. I feel like there's some discussions going on that I would hope that would be conducted on the floor of the Finance Committee so that we can deliberate together on these issues. I'm just wondering what the holdup is.
I don't believe there is a holdup. I think I don't know, Mr. Mancini, I presume Mr. Mancini just said he's again ready to put together their proposed amendment and then going to submit it to the Finance Committee to talk about it.
I mean, it's taken a while, and I just wonder why. We're already, end of February, so I'm just wondering why.
So if I may, Mr. Chairman, if you would allow me that opportunity to respond to Councilman Anthony. through the month of December, we waited for what the General Assembly's final action would be. It took us into the month of January where we had to actually receipt those funds and then reorganize the payment of of expenditures that were expected to be paid much sooner, including payoff of the final pension payment and therein. And of course, we've been working diligently with the council affiliates to reset the budget by by looking at all of our reports over the past 6 months. And we are at that point now where we're beginning to make those important decisions as to how the remainder of the fiscal year will shape up. Perfect example, Councilwoman, was Ms. Green testified before me earlier, and she was quite forthright in saying while this would be the appropriate budget for a full year, she was very transparent in saying that, but I don't think that we could spend it over the remaining 4 months or 3 months of the year. Those are exactly those type of calculations that we're trying to be more precise about, hoping that it'll be a better product once we share it with the council affiliates, that being your internal auditor, treasurer, and chief of staff, because that's the first level of our activity before we even come to a consensus to bring it forward for review by the finance committee. But we're working on it diligently and daily.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Mancini. Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, well, it is, first of all, any further questions? It is getting late. I mean, we're going to have another follow-up finance meeting on Thursday, which we'll have presentation about the Providence Police FOP budget. Also, I presume part of that conversation is, don't forget, I'm sure there's some financial aspects of that, which we...
Absolutely.
So, and I think this is also part of the conversation. So, and I'm going to dovetail a little bit. So during the past few months, quite a few months, the administration has been negotiating with the FOP trying to get a new contract, correct me if I'm wrong, and part of that has expenses. So I also know that until you guys could finally finalize that, that also is part of the budget process too, because you have to identify monies to pay for it. So there's, for Councilman Anthony's edification, there's a lot of moving pieces that occur in the city process that people don't realize, whether it's refunding of bonds or contract negotiations. And so what's going on is that, and as you get more deep into it and more involved and more experienced, you realize that it's not simply like what we do back at our house. Like, here's the bills come in on one day, we get our checkbook out and we pay that day. It's like the city has so many moving pieces, and I do know, I look forward to hearing the FOP presentation because I know the administration's been working hard on that, and there is a financial component to it, which means we have to account for it in this, these budgets that we're going to be amending this budget and the future budget. So, and I know that those numbers, you have to work out those numbers, and that's part of that process, Councilman Anthony. I just want to let you know that they have to work on to get that cleared up so they can, that when we do pass our new budget, there's money to pay for those, especially those types of, I hate to put it, those types of big ticket items. That's the general statement. So,
thank you, Mr. Chairman. And to Councilman Anthony's question again, I don't want to overshoot my mark, but that's exactly the point.
Yeah.
There was that intricacy of the budget impact that you'll hear about from us on Thursday evening. There was that intricacy. And yes, one of the budget activities did not close until the month of January on the bond refunding. So you're absolutely correct, Mr. Chairman. Thank you for that identification. Thank you.
Well, I endeavor to try to help my committee members and my council members, especially the new ones and the ones that are going to be running the city at next term, is there's so many moving pieces. And I'll just say this, when I first came on the council, I sat hours and hours and hours and hours and hours every day, 5 days a week, going over the city's finances and sitting in hours of finance committee meetings. Meeting at that time, the finance director, so I did everything I could to learn and understand the intricacies of the budget, and I still don't know all of it. There's so much involved. So every year and every month, I still learn another piece. So I don't want to say that it's amazing how many pieces are going involved in just this little city right here. And I cannot even imagine what it must be in the state level, then you go to the next level, the federal level, of all those pieces that must be just amazing. So, and I recognize that, and that's why sometimes, as much as people don't realize, the budget process is laborious, the budget process is not it's not a sexy thing, it's not like the hot topic, like, the Cabbage Patch doll that everybody wants, or the new Nintendo, right? It's like, it's a very laborious process. So I want to thank Mr. Mancini, of course, the council, financial folks who have been working with administration, trying to navigate through these financial trying times. By the way, this pandemic has created a lot of problems, you know, and how you're gonna handle the budget, the future budget, and it's just not, I don't think it's that easy. There's there's more complications, I think, now than there were ever, in that sense. That's my general sense, you know, so.
No doubt,
But I wanna thank
no
you,
doubt.
Mancini. So with that, I want to thank, by the way, the finance people, everybody for attending, Mr. Mancini, Ms. Lindberg, the committee members, council members. So what we'll do is if we can continue this matter, this item, and then we're going to have a finance meeting on Thursday, right, Mr. Clerk, at 5 o'clock? Okay. So I have a motion to continue.
Motion to continue, Mr. Chairman.
Second.
Vice Chair, do I have a second by Councilman Taylor? Discussion. I also request my council colleagues, if you're looking at some, you know, if you have other outstanding financial questions, reach out to the internal auditor, the treasurer, Mr. Mancini, and reach out and ask some additional questions as we keep rolling along. With that, and you can always call me too. Thank you. All in favor?
Aye.
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 Thank you all. Motion to adjourn?
Motion to adjourn.
Second.
Second. Taylor, discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Thank you all. Be well and be
Thank you.
safe.
Thank you all. Good job.